So I shared this video last week.
I've lived in the Western culture in the UK. The power and the authority lie with the citizens. A staggering amount of money will be spent on the 2024 presidential election.
The United States should adopt a Cold War-style containment policy toward China.
It's beginning to feel for many that it is broken. And the rich come out of their bunkers in New Zealand or wherever. But my question then becomes, how?
And in this video, I discussed the money in politics in the US and how decisions are made in Congress that are not for the benefit of the people, but in fact they're more reflective of the will and the desires of big money donors. This video also draws a fascinating conclusion or a parallel between the US's hate of China and China's economic ascent and the governance that's in place in China and what China represents around that. This model, as my video argued, has been remarkably successful. And if people in the West actually took the time to see what was happening in China and the wider Asian continent, then they would be asking a lot of questions. And hence, in my belief, the desperation of the USA and the allies to rubbish what China has achieved. China has been very, very successful in growing its economy extremely fast, doing it without conflict between itself and other nations. In fact, the last conflict was 45 years ago. That's 45 years since the last war China fought, and it was a war against Vietnam, and it lasted for just under a month, I believe. So almost, a long time since China's been at conflict. So they're not going to evade the USA or invade the USA. What people say. It's crazy. So we've come down to the park this morning. There's a lot of people in the park here in Beijing out exercising. Beautiful park. I'm on my way to somewhere, so I thought I would just stop by and talk a little bit to you, the camera. So while growing the country, China's economy, they've tackled a lot of things from corruption, poverty, education, the burden of house ownership, which kills a lot of people in the UK and the West. That's just a few things. Some people were actually curious in the last video about the voting process in China, as I had mentioned that, and I suggested that people check out the channel Jerry's Take on China for more information, and I still recommend that channel. Jerry is fantastic, lived here in China for many years and he's cycled around China and he's got lots of insight and he's got amazing stories to tell. So follow Jerry, Jerry's Take on China. But when I was on Twitter the other day, I stumbled across a very simple explanation of the whole voting system here in China, and I thought I would share that with you. But first, I wanted to drag the video I shared, this one, as a reference to the UK and how desperate the government in the UK is now beginning to sound. Watch this first.
Putin cut off the gas supplies. It had a devastating impact on people's lives and threatened our energy security. And in this world of greater conflict and danger, 100 million people are now displaced globally.
So I've changed location. Hopefully you can hear me because they're doing aerobics behind me here in the park, the older people. Maybe I should join them at my age. Anyway, regardless of where you stand with the war in Europe, in Ukraine, and your working knowledge of how that war started and what could possibly be behind it, trust me, I am no fan of war, and this whole war could have been avoided if you ask me, or at least it could have been concluded quite quickly with a peace agreement. Hate war, pointless thing. Anyway, listening to Sunak, you do have to admit that this statement from him, the Prime Minister of the UK, delivered as if it was accurate fact, is very much a bit of a distant relative of the truth. And I suppose I should not be shocked by a politician telling a wee white lie, as they say. But let's pause here and reflect a little on who Rishi Sunak is and how he became Prime Minister of the UK. No one voted for Sunak, no one. He came to power coronated by the Conservative Party after the abject failure of Liz Truss, who again no one voted for, at least though we did at that time have some leadership contest to get Liz Truss into power, and that was an absolute failure. The country did actually vote for Boris Johnson, remember him? Although he was found out to be another leader with a stark opportunity around telling the truth. Sunak is also a very wealthy man, and he has links to numerous companies that his government, the Tory government that he's ahead of, he has links to companies that have a terrible habit of giving or receiving large and profitable contracts from the very same government. So allegedly, it's always good to say allegedly, because you would have to read the details yourself to fully appreciate the scale of some of these allegations and then come to your own conclusion. But there is a smell of something fishy around the whole situation, if you ask me, and I don't mean anything to do with the British fishing industry, which has been virtually destroyed thanks to Brexit. Brexit that many of them themselves voted for because they read something on the side of a bus. Sunak does not have the backing of the people, polling around 20%, and yet refuses to this day to call a general election. And he's trying to pitch the whole idea that the current ruling party, his party, the Conservative Party, is the party for change, despite being in power for 14 years and in that time managing the country using a path of austerity and the financial and social acumen of a drunken darts player on stilts. Above all else, he is seeking to constantly drive division amongst the population in order to cause diversion, deflection, in the hope that they can somehow cling on to power because power serves them and their backers very, very well, financially, allegedly.
Extremists are also exploiting these global conflicts to divide us. People are abusing our liberal democratic values, the freedom of speech, right to protest, to intimidate, threaten, and assault others, to sing anti-Semitic chants on our streets and our university campuses, and to weaponize the evils of anti-Semitism or anti-Muslim hatred in a divisive, ideological attempt to set Britain against Britain. And from gender activists hijacking children's sex education to cancel culture, vocal and aggressive fringe groups are trying to impose their views on the rest of us. They're trying to make it morally unacceptable to believe something different and undermine people's confidence and pride in our own history and identity. Scottish nationalists are even trying to tear our United Kingdom apart.
So I've just shared a video with you of Rishi Sunak, and in this video he's lumping Scotland's leading political party, leading political movement, a party that enjoys 50% support of the people in Scotland. He's lumping that in with what he describes in his words, terrorists, rogue states or whatever. So much for a United Kingdom of equals, and most people in Scotland know that that's not true. Scotland, despite the weight and power of the state and their alleged dirty tricks, and the propaganda of fear, continues to have a massive support for independence. Don't listen to what other people tell you. Support is also often demonstrated at the election box, unlike Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the UK, who, as I have already said, was elected by absolutely no one. So this brings me back to the tweet, or the X as it's called, which is an odd name for an app named by the slightly unstable but genius Mr. Musk. X doesn't even sound right if you think of the sound that it makes. If you think of it's a one-syllable word. If you think of Google, Facebook, WeChat, Instagram, Weibo, X. Don't know what he's trying to do there, but it doesn't even sound right. It sounds like a porn site. But anyway, he did pay $40 billion, possibly tricked into paying a lot of money for something worth half the price. So he's going to be a bit reckless. Incidentally, he could actually write off the losses with some financial jiggery-pokery, so that he could end up paying nothing for Twitter X. And he could just roll that loss over. So maybe the joke is on us, by us, I mean the little tax-paying guys in the world, because we in the state pick up that bill if he just defaults or pushes that loss many years. Anyway, back to that tweet. The one that I said explained the voting process in China very, very well. So that rather than me try and explain it, I thought I would just share it with you. It's up here somewhere. and try and read it. So I'm going to read it. So, voting in China takes place at each of the 5 levels of government, from township, county, city, province to national. There is over 90% voter participation despite voting not being compulsory. People vote for candidates who are known to them and most relevant to the immediate community's needs and well-being. Candidate selection is based on merit, education, experience, training, commitment to their constituencies, and also understanding of the needs. Voting on policies, plans and actions takes place, but it's not the main process for decision making at various levels of government. Rather, there is considerable consultation and discussion on issues to ensure that the proposals are well refined and near consensus exists, which is simply formalised by voting. Once adopted, it behooves all participants to support the agreed outcome. Government officers can then get on with implementing the proposal promptly and efficiently without bickering. Apart from the major political party, the Communist Party of China, there are 7 or 8 minor parties. They are allocated a fixed and significant number of seats in the General Assembly, which guarantees their representation. There are not opposition parties like in the West, but exist to ensure that diverse views participate in government business. And the guy then goes on to say, this all sounds pretty democratic to me, folks. Please let me know if any of this is correct or incorrect, sorry. So again, leave comments below if you think this is wrong, but I checked his tweet X later and he actually had very few comments on that. So they're playing hacky sack, the kick beanbag thing. Lots of music and dancing in a park in China in the morning. A lot of people, older people, doing exercises, so it's amazing. Love a park in China in the morning. If you come to China, which I recommend, you should go into the local parks. Anyway, there you have it in a nutshell. China could be perceived as more democratic than some of the countries in the West, including the big name democracies, the ones that have that image but lack the qualitative substance. And Rishi Sunak and the current Conservative Party in the UK is something that definitely springs to mind here when I say that. And please don't look at Starmer and his Labour Party as an alternative. And I tell you what, here is my prediction for you. Are you ready for this? So this, you can record this, save this, and then play it to me later. So when we run up to the final weeks of the general election, the normally conservative-leaning press will suddenly switch to support Starmer and will pull the country that way, exactly the same way as they did with Tony Blair and his Labour government in the 90s. You do have to ask yourself the question, why would they do that? And to answer that, you need to explore who actually owns the press and the media in the UK. So who owns the press in the UK is down to 3 big companies. First one's called DMG Media. They publish the Daily Mail, the Metro and the I newspaper, which is a small newspaper in the UK. Then there's the second company, it's called News UK, and they publish the Sun, the Times and so on Sky, and it's Rupert Murdoch, I think. Murdoch. Aye. And then there's the other one, Reach, the Daily Mirror, Daily Express, Daily Star. They dominate, all of this together dominates 90% of the national newspaper circulating in the UK today. And they're all, or more or less all, leaning heavily towards the Conservative Party. But trust me, they will switch to Labour. Why? Money. Protect himself. And the owners don't even live in the UK. That's a laughable thing. It's crazy. We're mugs. Mugs, absolute mugs. So in essence, we're back to the exact same thing here. Big money interest being served well and way before the majority of the people. And what worries me most is that in the West, the last time, sorry, something in my eye, but what worries me the most is that the last Labour government that led the UK with that backing, they actually led us into the unjust wars in the Middle East. And God help us if history does repeat itself, because this time, if they do the same, war, conflict will be on a scale, absolute another level. Could it be extinction level? I'm not sure. But whatever you do, don't watch that excellent TV show, Fallout. Great show. But that show, this one, could well be our future if we are not careful. Don't worry, the wealthy, they'll be fine. They'll be in their bunkers in New Zealand. Anyway, this is me, Ian, here, early morning in Beijing, wishing you all the best, urging you to look after yourself, your family, your community. This is a community, this park, beautiful community. Look after all of that, take care of yourself. I will see you soon. I'm going to head meet Bruce in Tianjin for another video. Anyway, take care of yourself. Peace out. Take this thing off. Need this so you can hear me. Too much music.
We got to be strong. Okay, we're tough and we're strong, and we've released all these missiles now, the intermediate range missile, the Pershing II, and we're going to have more Tridents too. And what was the Soviet response? The Soviet response is to put cruise missile into attack submarines and put more of them off our coast. Now, if someone's going to tell me that that increases our national security, well, I don't know. It's a whole ball game that I don't understand.